You're 14 years old, and your alarm clock screams at 6:30 a.m. like it's on fire. You didn't go to bed early. No modern teen does. You were up doom scrolling, watching strangers get rich on TikTok and pretending you weren't anxious about tomorrow's math test. Your first brilliant move of the day. Drag yourself out of bed after hitting snooze 5 times, only to realize you forgot to do your history homework. Again, you rush to dress, choke down a bite of cereal, and get ready to be stuffed into a school bus like a sardine in a tin. And congratulations, this is only the beginning of your daily descent into the public education HELLSCAPE. By 8 a.m., you're at school, and it feels like walking into a minimum security prison. Gray walls, flickering fluorescent lights, lockers that never open right, and a teacher who's already yelling about phones before you've even sat down. You're not a person here, you're a problem to be managed, a GPA to be measured, and a statistic waiting to underperform on standardized tests. The school system doesn't want thinkers. It wants quiet. It wants compliance. It wants test scores. If you're creative, curious, or even just tired, tough luck. There's a system to follow, and it hasn't changed since your grandparents were in school. Same subjects, same rigid schedule, same soul-crushing boredom. You're herded from class to class by bells that feel more Pavlovian than educational. Science, sit down and memorize the periodic table. English, read a novel that hasn't been relevant since the Cold War. Math, learn quadratic equations that you'll never use, unless you become a rocket scientist, which, spoiler alert, you probably won't. But God forbid you ask why. The minute you question the system, you're labeled as a disruption. You try to keep up. You really do, but your brain is fried. Your back hurts from that overloaded backpack, and you're running on caffeine, anxiety, and vibes. The worst part? Everyone tells you these are the best years of your life. If that's true, someone please time travel you to retirement age ASAP. Welcome to the modern school system. Hope you survive. By now, you've accepted that school isn't really about learning. It's about surviving. Every class feels like a rerun of something you never asked to watch. The curriculum? Straight out of the educational Stone Age. Let's talk history. You're learning about ancient civilizations and world wars in the exact same way your parents did, with dusty textbooks, monotone lectures, and grainy documentaries. Never mind that the world is melting, democracy is breaking, and AI might steal your job. You're still stuck writing essays on Napoleon like it's 1955. Science is just as ancient. Climate change, barely a footnote. CRISPR, never heard of it. The most exciting thing you'll do is dissect a frog that smells like expired chemicals. But sure, let's spend 3 weeks reviewing the water cycle. Again, then there's math. And no, you're not learning how to do your taxes, apply for a loan, or even calculate interest on a credit card. Instead, you're being force-fed formulas that make you question reality. You ask the teacher, when will I ever use this? They say, trust the process. But deep down, even they know it's nonsense. Health class, a joke. Sex ed is taught like a bad horror film. Everything is terrifying. Nothing is explained. And nobody answers your real questions. Mental health is treated like an optional side quest. One assembly a year and a poster in the counselor's office saying you matter in Comic Sans. And don't even get started on electives. Want to take a class on filmmaking, coding, or entrepreneurship? Good luck. Those are underfunded, understaffed, and usually replaced with keyboarding, or family and consumer science, which basically means sewing a pillow and learning how to microwave soup. The worst part, you know the system is broken. Everyone does. Your teachers are burnt out. The school board is decades behind, and politicians keep cutting budgets while demanding higher test scores. It's like trying to upgrade a flip phone with duct tape and prayer. And through all of it, you're expected to stay focused, stay motivated, and do your best. But how can you do your best when you're being taught by a system that hasn't been updated? Since MySpace was cool, you're not falling behind because you're lazy. You're falling behind because the system is running on expired software and no one's brave enough to hit reboot. So, you're stuck in a system that treats education like a factory line. And standing at the end of that conveyor belt, teachers. But don't get it twisted. They're not villains. They're just exhausted humans with a front row seat to the collapse. Your teachers probably entered the profession full of hope. They wanted to make a difference, change lives, maybe inspire the next Einstein or Maya Angelou. Fast forward a few years, and now they're drowning in paperwork, mandated tests, and endless meetings that could have been emails. Half of them are burnout. The other half are counting down the days to retirement like prisoners with a calendar and a marker. And the few who still care, they're often too overwhelmed to help. Between oversized classrooms, crumbling resources, and a salary that barely covers rent, they're just trying to survive the day like you are. Let's not forget how powerless they are. Want to update the curriculum? Nope, not their call. Want to skip the standardized testing nonsense and actually teach something useful? Sorry, district policy won't allow it. They're micromanaged from the top down, stuck enforcing rules they don't believe in, and yet you're expected to respect them, always, even when they belittle your anxiety, roll their eyes at your ADHD, or tell you to just focus harder like it's a magical spell. You can't really blame them though. Most were never trained to deal with mental health or trauma. They're following a script written decades ago, in a language that no longer fits. Then there's the disciplinary system. Step out of line, and suddenly your teacher turns into a hall pass Gestapo. Miss one assignment, that's a 0. Speak out of turn, detention. Wear a hoodie, violation. The system rewards control, not connection, and teachers are just trying to keep the chaos contained. Some of them still try to connect. You'll have that one teacher who lets you vent after class, who notices when you're off, who actually sees you. But they're rare, and often the system burns them out faster than the apathetic ones. Care becomes a liability. So what are you left with? A front line of underpaid, overstressed adults enforcing an outdated system while pretending it still works. They're not your enemy, but they're not your lifeline either. In another world, they be your mentors. Here, they're just another broken cog in a machine that's crushing both of you. Let's talk about the ultimate soul-crushing ritual of modern education, standardized testing. Because nothing says, we care about your future like forcing every student into the same rigid mold and judging their worth with a number on a Scantron sheet. Your intelligence, reduced to multiple choice. Your creativity, irrelevant. Your anxiety, ignored. What matters is how well you bubble and answer C. These tests were supposed to measure progress. Instead, they become the curriculum. Teachers don't teach anymore. They test prep. Forget learning for the sake of knowledge. You memorize just enough to survive exam week, then eject it from your brain like last year's phone charger. Worse, everything depends on these scores. Your school's funding, your teacher's job security, your future college chances, all hanging on whether you remember the Pythagorean theorem. Under fluorescent lights with a dry mouth and a pit in your stomach. And the pressure? It's ridiculous. Some schools literally bribe students with pizza parties or raffle tickets just to get them to care. Meanwhile, you're sitting there panicking about your future because one bad day could tank your academic trajectory. Let's not forget how biased these tests are. If English isn't your first language, good luck. If you have ADHD and can't sit still for 3 hours, sucks to be you. If you're neurodivergent, sleep deprived, or just plain human, too bad. The test doesn't care. And the kicker? Most of these tests don't even test useful knowledge. When was the last time you needed to identify a gerund or solve for X in real life? You've spent hours drilling info you'll never use, while real-life skills like taxes, mental health, or critical thinking rot in a forgotten corner. So, you end up trained to perform, not to think, conditioned to comply, not to question. Standardized testing doesn't prepare you for life. It prepares you for more standardized systems, jobs, bureaucracy, systems that value obedience over originality. The message is clear. Fall in line, stay in your lane, and whatever you do, don't mess up the data. Your school's reputation depends on it. And if you fail, it's not the system's fault. It's yours. Always yours. Remember when you were a kid and learning was actually exciting? When you asked why 1,000 times and nobody had to bribe you to care? Yeah. That version of you didn't last long in the system, because modern schooling is where creativity goes to die. Art, music, drama, gone or slashed into oblivion. Why waste time painting when you could be drilling equations for a test that won't even help you get a job? Why write poetry when you could be writing a 5-paragraph essay about the symbolism of a dead tree? Your passions get labeled extracurricular, translation, not important. And if you're not naturally good at math or science, you're treated like a defective product. Never mind that the real world needs designers, storytellers, builders, visionaries. Nope. If your skill set doesn't fit neatly into a testable format, It's disposable. School isn't built to develop your talents. It's built to rank you, to put you on a scoreboard and pit you against your peers in a never-ending contest for validation. A system where being average feels like failure, and where standing out the wrong way gets you labeled a distraction. And curiosity, that's a liability. Questioning the system, challenging ideas, proposing alternatives, these things don't earn you praise. They get you marked as disruptive. The student who dares to ask why are we learning this isn't seen as engaged. They're seen as a problem. So you learn to suppress your curiosity. You play it safe. You do the bare minimum to stay afloat, while your natural love of learning withers in the shadow of rigid rubrics and arbitrary grading. Worse still, the system punishes risk. Got an original idea? Better stick to the prompt. Want to try something different? That's not how we do things here. Innovation isn't rewarded. Conformity is by the time you're out. You've been trained to think inside the box, work inside the lines, and live inside a framework designed for someone else's version of success. And yet, the irony? Every adult out there is shouting, be creative, think outside the box, as if they didn't spend 12 years taping your brain shut. So here you are, graduated or almost there, a product of the machine. You've spent more than a decade being graded, ranked, sorted, compared, and told what you're worth based on numbers, letters, and how quietly you can sit for 8 hours. And now what? You're expected to figure out who you are, what you care about, and how to function in the real world, all without ever having been truly prepared for it. You've been taught to memorize, but not to understand, to obey, but not to think, to follow, but not to lead. You've probably asked yourself, was it all for nothing? Not entirely, because if there's one thing this broken system accidentally teaches, it's resilience. Not in the feel-good, motivational poster way, but in the gritty, survive or crumble sense. You learn how to adapt, how to game the system, just enough to pass, how to find tiny sparks of freedom in a place designed to keep you numb. But that doesn't mean it's good enough. You deserve better. Your generation deserves better. We need a system that values people over productivity, that treats curiosity as a gift, not a glitch, that understands that being a teenager today isn't about memorizing facts. It's about navigating a chaotic, hyper-connected world where mental health, creativity, and meaning matter more than standardized tests. So yeah, school still sucks. But the fact that you're here, questioning it, thinking critically, looking for answers, that means the system didn't completely win. And if this video spoke to something you felt but couldn't quite explain, you're not alone. Share it, comment. Let's build a community that sees through the nonsense and wants something better. Because if we're going to survive being modern teens, we might as well do it together. Subscribe for more brutally honest breakdowns of the world we're stuck in, because truth is, it's not just you. Life still sucks. But we're not giving up just yet.